Good morning and welcome to the second part of episode 158 of Tree Talk. Where yesterday we were going through all the weekend results that happened last weekend, Matt. We were going through all of this weekend's fixtures with a host of football and hurling and camogie to get through. We have the semi-finals in the Intermediate Football Championship, the Premier Junior Championship, and we've won semi-final the Junior A Championship. We have the quarter-finals in the Junior A Hurling Championship, and we look back on the group stages because so much happened on the final day, and we also have camogie to look forward to with the last round of games in the senior intermediate. So it's a jam-packed episode, so stay tuned after this intro.
The impression the game you get out with what you put into. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawty Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the left brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Good morning, Matt. How are you on this fine Thursday morning?
Very good, Jack. How are you?
Thank God, no, it was great. We had a lovely week of weather, thank God. Anyway, so hopefully it sticks around for the weekend for the games.
And hopefully, you know, we're actually spoiled for choice spoiled with the quality of the fare that we have seen for the last couple of weeks. I suppose if there's any downside to it is that we couldn't have got around to see enough of it.
Yeah.
Because I know you and I missed the senior football semi-finals, and we also missed you know what was, and we'll be discussing it in a minute. What was a riveting weekend in the Junior A Hurling Championship, which now is heading for a climax. So, you know, all we want this week, Jack, is more of the same.
Yeah, more of the same. And I suppose today we will start with the football because there was a lot of hurling played over the weekend. So we'll give football its due, and we have the two intermediate semi-finals, as I said. We'll start with St. Cairns versus Kilkenny at 4 o'clock this Saturday in Askeaton. We'll start with Kilkenny because definitely out of the remaining four teams, alongside obviously St. Cairns, Rathkeane and Jar Griffins, you have to say KP are the surprise package. But as a club overall, with the hurling included, they've been building so much over the last few years. I remember we played Kilkenny in 2015, the year after they won the Junior B, and now they're 2 steps away from senior themselves. Like, it's been an incredible transformation for the city side.
An incredible transformation, and they won the Junior A in 2018 when they beat Cappamore in Newcastle West in the final, and you know, they didn't really root up any trees, certainly in their first year, and it looked as if the struggle continued into the second year. And like even there were doubts this year, even though we'll say they got off to the perfect start this year, when they faced Drumculloch Bradford in the opening round, and it was Drum's first game out of senior ranks in over 2 decades, and we know what they achieved in the 2 decades when they were up there. And like, you know, the expectation wasn't great that they'd get off to a winning start, but they did. And they got off in an emphatic manner. And subsequently, Drum Bradford had a big win over Crocora Manister. And the expectation going into the final round was that it would be a second win for Kildimo Pallaskenry. But that's not what transpired, Jack. They were beaten by Crocora Manister, 13 points to 10, and had to rely on scoring difference to progress, as the three sides had finished on 2 points each. But I think it was in the quarter-final that they made a statement, because Mungret St. Paul's would have been fancied in many quarters, because they have been flirting with a breakthrough for a number of years now. And but of course, the one little caveat, of course, is that at that stage, Mungret St. Paul's and they were juggling with hurling and football commitments. Now, all right, Kildimo Palace Kenry had the same for a lot of the year, and I suppose maybe the less than impressive performance against Crocora Manister, you could probably attribute it to that, because I think, if I'm right, they were facing into a big hurling game with Adair, a make or break hurling game.
Yeah.
So, but certainly they have been the surprise packet down there. Like John Chalk has taken over as manager. He has brought in Ollie Coffey as his coach, and certainly they have been revitalized as a football force, and of course they're in a position now, because of the fact that the hurling commitments are over for this year, that they can put all their eggs in the football basket.
Yeah, and they seem to revel in that fact. And I suppose their opponents then this weekend are seasoned at intermediate, and have also had a good sprinkling of senior championship experience in that time. Like, St. Cairns will have to go in as favourites. They were so comprehensive in the group stages. I think they had a plus 36 scoring difference after 2 games, which is incredible. And then they won their semi-final at ease, 111 to 4 points against Palace Green. And that game was on the same day as we were both in Rackeel for senior football championship games. And to score 111 in that torrential rain says a lot about a team. So even though Kildimo Palace are building, you'd still have to fancy St. Cairns.
Yeah, of course. Cairns were they were champions in 2017. They beat Galway in the final, and the following year they went up senior, and they only missed out under the old system of the 6-team groups. They only missed out in the quarterfinals in 2019 on scoring difference. And of course, then the following year they got relegated. In 2018 they only missed out on scoring difference. 2019 they got relegated. In 2020, I think they reached the semi-final.
Yeah.
But like there's a huge residual of senior experience in that team, and there is some players in that St. Cairns team like that have represented the county at top level, none more so than having somebody like Ian Ryan on board and captaining the team. And James Bridgman is there, James Norton is there. There's some very exciting players on the Cairns team, and it certainly is going to be a very, very big step up for Kildimo Palace Kenry. It certainly will be the toughest test they have faced so far. Now, you could say that facing a wounded Drumculloch Broadford in the first round might have been a very, very severe test, but they answered that question. But I think this is a different kettle of fish now. It's knockout football. It's 60 minutes away from a county final. I think St. Cairns will be very, very formidable.
Yeah, St. Cairns definitely be a formidable side, and they made.
But if there is a problem with St. Cairns, and you've touched on it, Jack, I think, is that they haven't been really tested yet. Yeah. They have not been really tested. You gave the statistics there, which were absolutely correct in terms of scoring and scoring difference. But I honestly think that those connected with Saint Cairns at the moment, and Morris Horn, of course, is in there as coach. And I have no doubt that it will not be lost on him with Darren Kavanagh as manager. They will be quite aware of the fact that they haven't got a real serious test yet, because in the group stages they scored something like 733 in 2 games in wins over Monaleen and Bruff. Like and conceding so little. I think they only conceded 4 points in one and 6 in the other, or something like that. Not ideal getting out of the group. But certainly going into the cut and thrust of knockout football, it certainly isn't what you would want, Jack. And in terms of having been tested going into the semi-final, it's thumbs up Kildimo Palace Kenry in that one,
Yeah, definitely. And we'll touch more on that game when we get to predictions later on. But when you're talking about untested teams, like when we say St. Cairns haven't been tested, you have to say the same for Gerald Griffins, who have only played 2 games this year. They obviously were big winners over Palace Green in the group stages, got a walkover over Glynn, and then were 122 to 5 point winners over Bruff in the semi-final. So, like, Joe Griffins have been the favourites and probably have been favourites now for 3 years, but they're very undercooked coming against a Rathkeale side that would always thought they'd be thereabouts. But the manner of their win over Broadford was very impressive too. We'll start with Rathkeale, Matt, because you were in McNeville for that game and you were very impressed with Rathkeale.
I was very impressed with them, Jack. I think we both expected that they'd win. They eventually won the game by 3 points, but it was a very, very, very comprehensive 3 points victory, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think a 3 points victory on the day reflected the superiority of Rathkeale on the night. It was actually played in Nortonstown that game, and like there were full value for that 3 points victory. Like it was Drumculloch were very, very disappointing on the night. And what happened, of course, on that particular night was that Rathkeale created a number of goal-scoring chances and didn't take them. Drumculloch or Broadford created one, and in typical Drum Broadford, as we've seen over the years, they took it. Yeah. And like it was even though Rathkeale were dominant, they had a level of mastery that's very, very hard to explain. But in a way, it was a good test for them, insofar as that when that goal came in the second half, they were battling against what could a goal that could have sparked a Drumculloch revival. But they nipped it on the bud, and they ran out very comfortable winners by 3 points. Now, in the group stages, strange to say, they failed to get a victory. Yeah. Which is interesting in itself, but they failed to be defeated either, in that they were involved in 2 stalemates with St. Patrick's and Mungret St. Paul's. So, when it comes to resilience and when it comes to digging out results, probably of the 4, they are the best equipped. But they're facing a Gerald Griffin side. What can we say about Gerald Griffins? Beaten in the final in 2019 after a replay by Galtee Gales. Beaten in the final last year by Claughaun. Coming into this semi-final untested. But Jack, of the 4 teams that are remaining in the competition, they have an array of big players. We're talking about Brian Scanlon to start with, who's the captain, the experience that he brings. You're talking about Jim Liston, Colin McSweeney, Dara Noonan, Tommy Griffin. Huge experience with Limerick, which they'll be bringing to the table. And above all, they'll be bringing huge semi-final experience to the table. In that it's their 3rd semi-final in a row, and they have dug out victories in the previous semi-finals, and they seem to know how to get over semi-finals, but have lost the knack of winning finals, or cannot develop the knack of winning finals. Now, I remember playing in a quarter-final about 4 or 5 years ago, these sides in Newcastle West, and it was one of the most dramatic games, I think, that I saw for many a day. We had Rathkeale were winning by 6 points with 10 minutes to go, and Gerald Griffins kicked 7 points in a row without reply. I think that was in 2019, actually. 2019,
yeah. The COVID has brought you on a few years, but it was only 2 years ago, incredibly. But it's the 4th year in a row that these teams are going to meet in the knockout stages. Rathkeale got to win in 2018, went on to the final. Gerald Griffins in 19 and 20 went on to the final. Yeah. So the 4th year in a row that the winner this time will go on to the final. And you don't want to say one of them is going to be favourites because you don't know what happens in their semi-final. But you would imagine who comes through this one will probably be favoured to win the final. Now, that all could change. But you'd think if you can come through a battle like that, not saying St. Simmons or KP will be any easier, but I think this will probably be a more physical kind of contest than the other one.
Yeah, it will. And it's not too long ago, of course, Rathkeale Rakiel were previously they were intermediate champions in 2013 when they put on a display for the ages in the final in trouncing Ula in the final in 2013. They subsequently had a couple of years then at 4 years at senior level, and it looked in 2018 that they were about to break through and get back into senior ranks when they came up against Galway in the final, and in what was an arm wrestle of a low-scoring game, 168 points, Galway just shaded it. So, like, it isn't as if Rathkeale don't have experience in the intermediate championship at this level, because there are some players still around like that were around way back in 2013, the like of Keith Hartnett, Gary Enright, Owen O'Donnell, Dean Maughan, they were all around back then, and plus, of course, so many of the players that are there now have been around for the 2018 final. So, like, for them, it'll be a certain amount of unfinished business. But I was hugely impressed, Jack, by the way they went about their business against Drum Bradford.
Yeah, like, I wasn't there now myself, but just talking to people and reading the report, and even talking to the few of the boys from Rathkeale, that they said they probably did deserve to by more, and it wasn't cockiness or arrogance or anything, that they just definitely deserved to by more. But we've seen the KP beat Drum as well. A lot of these teams have crossed over. Patster Griffins and St. Simons have both beat Pallasgreen and Bruff. So they have been the four standout teams. There's no denying that they have deserved to get to this level, and we'll talk a bit more when we get to prediction at the end, Matt. The Premier Junior semi-finals are also on at the weekend. You have Newcastle West versus Mount Collins on Sunday in Drum Bradford. But firstly, you have Father Casey's versus Croom on Saturday in McNeville Park. Croom, like, have been thereabouts for a good few years, Matt. Obviously lost the final in 17 to Gerald Griffins, or to Galtee Gales, and we saw what Galtee Gales have done. So they'll be desperate to get over the line. But for Father Casey's, even though it's their second team, they've won so many minor championships. They're going to have a lot of them teams in it. Like, it's very hard to call that game on Saturday.
Very, very hard to call. And just to give a small bit of background to it, in that two of these teams, Newcastle West and Father Casey's, came out of the same group. And certainly it wasn't an ideal group, because the third team in the group were Hospital Herbertstown, who pulled out and have subsequently been relegated, and that condemned the Great Western rivals to just having one game in the group stages, which is far from ideal going into this stage of the championship. But both showed well when it came to the knockout stages, and but I suppose we were talking about Kildimo Pallaskenry being the surprise team in the intermediate championship. If there's to be a surprise team in the Premier Junior A championship, it has to be Mount Collins. Because I think Mount Collins raised a certain amount. All right, I know you're shaking your head a small bit there, Jack, but they're just down, like, from intermediate ranks, and it's not always that easy to pick it up. But, like, they were far from fancied going into the quarterfinal against a very much fancied a Tayside.
Yeah, true.
So, you know, they dug out a great victory in that. So they are a force to be reckoned with. Like, from a Father Casey's point of view, if they probably got a boost and a fillip when and not that you should be getting a boost or a fillip if you're ever knocked out of a competition, when they were probably knocked out of the senior championship, and that there was no longer going to be a draw on the junior team. So the junior team management, once the seniors were gone, were happy that what they had, and you know, they have, and they were able to work with them. So cases are formidable. Now, you asked me at the very start of this competition, who did I fancy? And I said Croom.
Yeah.
And I've seen little to make me digress from that opinion. But I do know that this is a very, very serious test of Croom. Now, and there being a draw on the Father Casey's team with the seniors. Croom were in a position up to about 2 weeks ago where they were trying to juggle hurling and football commitments. And now Granny Ballingarry put an end to that in the intermediate quarter final. So now all the focus in Croom will be on football. So I think they'll be able to give it a right lash. They have been hanging around there. They've had a number of dalliances with success in this competition in the last number of years, and now is their opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and just on the Premier Junior competition as a whole, because it's the first year of it. When you look at the quarterfinals there, Croom beat Castleman by 2 points. That was the biggest victory that was there. And then you had 1 point wins for Newcastle against Monaghan. Mount Collins were 8 points and 7 winners over Athay, and Father Casey's beat Kilteely Drumkeen by a single point. So just for the organisation that decided we're going to have a Premier Junior campaign, it's been definitely vindicated, Matt.
Absolutely vindicated. Absolutely vindicated, and certainly right from the start we were of the opinion, and we suspected that it would be a success. Now, the only thing that the fly in the ointment or the only disappointment is what I alluded to there a while ago, the fact that there was one group where a team pulled out, and I think that was unfortunate. Now, the organisers and the county board, they had absolutely no control over that, nor couldn't have foreseen something like that happening. But it happened, but other than that, as a competition, you would have to say it was a success.
Definitely, and we'll come back to those games a bit more because we'll get predictions off you for them games. We'll look at the Junior A Championship now, and I won't ask for a prediction unless you want to, between Bannog versus Feeney Kilmeady, because we have another game to come next weekend. Now, if you want to call this one, you can, but Ballybrick and Bohermore versus Camogie Rovers isn't on till next week because obviously Ballybrick and Bohermore's involvement in the Junior A Championship. But Bannog versus Feeney Kilmeady, I suppose Bannog were champions of the Junior B in 2019 and were kind of robbed of a season last year, so they'll be desperate to make up for last time. But Feeney Kilmeady themselves are only up in the Junior A ranks probably 6 or 7 years this stage. So again, 2 teams that are building and will be desperate to get into the Premier Junior competition.
They're not actually, Jack. They're not up in Junior A for 5 or 6 years. Actually, as a football force, they went out of existence when a number of their players went to Drumbradford, but returned last year or the year before. Now, you're right. Bannog won the Junior B South and County Championship in 2019, in that memorable final in Martinstown, where Gary McInerney got that crucial last minute goal to win it over Knock-On. It was a memorable night in that it was a massive crowd and a final to be fit such a big attendance. But yeah, you see, then both were involved in their respective Junior B competitions in 2020. Now, Bannog retained their title. They beat Camogie Rovers in the final, which was played sometime earlier on this year. Now, Feeney Kilmeady got to the final, but lost the West Junior B final in 2020. They lost to Adair. So, but they are coming as a force, and they have a number of players there, as I already referred to, that have seen senior experience with Drumbradford, the like of the O'Gormans, Brian Hannigan, Daniel Gare, etc., who were part, and I suppose their departure back to their own club contributed maybe in no small way to Drumbradford subsequently being relegated. Like if you suddenly have 4 or 5 players who suddenly go off the squad for reasons other than retirement or injury, it's very, very hard to fill that gap, Jack.
Yeah, it is.
So this is a very interesting game. It's a novel game. 2 years ago, you would have said it couldn't have happened because Banog were playing Junior B. Fine Kilmeedy literally weren't in existence, but here we have it. And it's going to be a very, very interesting semi-final, I think.
Yeah, it is. I must apologise there I was just looking at when they won in 2013, but obviously they've...
A lot has happened since. They were Junior B champions in 2013. I think it was Newcastle West they beat in the final in 2013, if I'm right.
I'm unsure now about that, Matt, but yeah, they definitely won in 13.
I'm pretty certain it was Newcastle West.
We're back-to-back winners, but we'll come to the predictions for the football in a while, Matt. We'll turn our attentions to hurling now, and we'll give the Junior A its due because it's been a fantastic competition. So before we get into the quarterfinals, we'll just throw the quarterfinals up here for you that are to play this weekend. You've Mungret versus St. Pat's on Saturday in Clarina, Ballybrick and Bohermore versus Killeedy on Saturday in Kilfinnan. Then on Sunday, Dune versus Saint Cairns in Kilmallock and Caroline versus Ballybrown in Kilbreedy. But we'll go through the groups all together. So this is Group 1. Mungret St. Paul's topped the group with 4 wins from 5 with 8 points ahead of Dune, who finished ahead of Fine Kilmeedy by points differential. And you have to say, Fine Kilmeedy will feel a bit hard done by. They beat Mungret, but Dune were huge winners over Monaleen. I was at 8-26 to 8 points. I gave him a 42-point swing or something like that to pull him through. But I've seen all those teams today. My own Keaton were in this group, and to be fair, the most impressive teams were Mungret, St. Paul's, and Dune. Now the only thing for Mungret, Matt, is obviously they've lost a few players to the Premier Intermediate setup, so they will be down a few. But just on that group, Matt, Mungret and Dune were worried to come out of an exceptional group, really.
Yeah, if I make a general comment about the Junior Championship first, Jack, and the first comment I would make is that of the 4 semi-finalists last year, none of them are involved this year, which is surprising. In that Croke Kilfinney, we know, are gone up intermediate. That's okay, but Patrick Swell, Shahan, and Drum Bradford failed to come out of their respective groups.
Yeah.
Now, if you look back at Group 1, which you have put up there, it was an unusual group in many ways, and possibly Fine Kilmeedy and Keaton are entitled to ask themselves questions, because this was a group with 4 second teams. You had Mungret, Dune, Patrick Swell, and Monaleen. And you would think all day that the first teams, the first Junior A teams would be favourites and would be the most likely in those circumstances. But that's not the way it transpired. And you're right with the way that the final fallout about it was that huge win over by Dune over Monaleen in the final round. It certainly robbed. It was a 42-point turnaround. It robbed Fine Kilmeedy of a place in the quarterfinals, and they'll obviously be bitterly disappointed. So it really went down to the wire in that group. So they're fantastic games, and you can see what the final outturn of the table was. So it is what it is now, Jack. It's 2 second teams are going through. There's 3 second teams of the 8 in all. Now I have no problem at all with second teams, none whatsoever. I say hats off to the clubs that can put out second teams that can be so competitive. And you must remember Patrick Swell got to the semi-final last year.
Yeah,
their second team. But I say hats off to Mungret, St. Paul's, and Dunes of this world if they can beat the first Junior A teams of other clubs.
Yeah,
it's a sure sign that they are doing something very, very right.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I suppose for Dune, they're out of the senior now, so they have a share of players. Obviously, Bob Purcell was one that stood out against us. I'm not sure that Dara Staple won the last day against Patrickswell. I think he might have.
He did, he did, he did, he
Yeah,
did, he
so he
did.
was one that was going well for the juniors. But obviously, Munger St. Paul's lost, just from our game, Conor Helliwell at centre back and Shams Jagana, wing forward, was exceptional that day. They were both burned as well. But when you say that group went down to the wire, that one actually, Munger were through before.
They were through, but the second place went down to the wire. It was contingent on what happened on the last day. And, it always disappoints me in any group whereby you have a walkover. And there was a walkover in the fourth round where Monaleen conceded a walkover to Munger St. Paul's.
Yeah.
That is that's a disappointing situation in any competition. And we spoke briefly about it in the context of the Premier Junior A football as well in Newcastle West and Father Cases, but it's very, very disappointing when you see a team playing 3 games and then giving a walkover. That there's a bit of throwing in the towel about that, but I suppose credit Monaleen, they did turn out on the last day of the for the final round, and it did have a serious impact, certainly on the chances of Feeney Kilmeady.
Yeah, but I was just making the point that Munger St. Paul's were the only team that had gone through, and looking at Group 2, came down to the wire. Saint Cairns knew that a win over Han would see them through. They got the job done. Han are into a relegation playoff. But St. Pat's played Kilteely Drumkeen with the winners of that in Benson. St. Pat's came out on top. It finished 117 to 112 in Kilteely Drumkeen's favour. And then, obviously, Gareth Spillane and Monaghan's season came to an end. But it's probably the standout result of the whole year. Gareth Spillane 7-17, Monaghan 5-20. Just looking at that group, Matt, I suppose you probably would have fancied Pats to come through after recent experience in intermediate ranks, but St. Cairns are probably a bit of a surprise package.
They are, and I would have thought, looking at it from the outset, I would have had a fancy before it started for Kilteely Drumkeen, I think. Now they came close. Obviously, we would have had a fancy for St. Patrick's as well, because they have just come down and were very unlucky to come down. Plus the fact that they had a certain Mr. Hegarty on board.
Two Mr. Hegartys.
Two Mr. Hegartys who can inspire all things. So, that was a bit of a surprise, but it was nail biting to the finish. Like Cairns had to do the job on the last day against a Han, and there was a huge. Now the expectation was that they would, and they did, but the St. Patrick's Kilteely Drumkeen game took on a knockout feel about it. It was a knockout championship game, Jack.
Yeah.
I am not so sure about if you put up the graphic again there. Had it ended in stalemate, it would have
been Kilteely's, because there would have been a 10-point swing in points difference.
There would have been a 10-point swing, and it would have been Kilteely's, yeah.
Yeah, but St. Patrick's deserved it. 5-point winners is relatively comprehensive, in a knockout game.
It is, and the stakes, with the stakes being so high, it is a convincing win. There's no doubt at all about that. And St. Pat's are there on merit, and they put themselves into a position, Jack, where they will be. They certainly will have a big say in the shake-up. But just interestingly, looking at the group stage there again, the biggest scorers, the highest scorers in the group were actually Kilteely Drumkeen.
Yeah, and the scoring in that group was a lot higher than the other group. I think Dune had 120 points, but that was by manner of their huge victory the last day. We might move on to Group 3, Matt. Well, obviously, St. Cairns are going to play Dune on Sunday, and St. Pat's are taking on Munger St. Paul's. So Group 1 and Group 2 kind of come together as a package. Will discuss predictions in a while. Then Group 3 and Group 4. In Group 3, Ballybrick and Bohermore topped it on level on points with Caherline, just ahead of Crocora Manister, and all Christians go into a playoff. Now, Caherline beat Crocora Manister on the final day by 5 points to book their place. Ballybrick and Bohermore knew a win over Templeglantine would see them through. Again, they got the job done. But I suppose, interestingly, to the other side of the table, Broadford and All Christians needed to beat Broadford to avoid relegation for the second year running. They got a draw, and I think they had a chance to win it late on. So, again, another group that went right down to the wire, Matt.
Another group at both ends of the table. Ballybrick and Bohermore had to beat Templeglantine. They got that job done. Had they not, they could have been into a three-way scramble on points difference, although their points difference is very, very healthy at plus 46. And Caherline had to beat Crocora Manister to be absolute to go through, because had Crocora Manister beaten them, it would be they that would have been going through with Ballybrick and Bohermore. So again, it was down to the wire. Now, and also at the bottom, as you have alluded to there, Jack, Drumcolloher Broadford and All Christians. And had All Christians won it, they would have been staying up on the head-to-head.
Yeah.
It was that close, and as you said there, that if that late chance that they had they made it count, Broadford would have gone from championship semi-finalists a couple of months ago in the delayed 2020 to relegation semi-finalists, which would have been a serious fall from grace. But I suppose it's better to be nearly relegated than nearly saved. So. Yeah. They'll probably look at it that way.
Yeah, and you just look at the championships overall, and it just depends on any given year. If a team can get their house in order, they can do great things. Like Granagh Ballingarry were in a relegation playoff last year against St. Pat's, and they reached the semi-final of the intermediate this year. And Pat's will have to work hard to get out of Junior A. Now they still have a chance, but even you said Drumcolloher Broadford there, Patrick's Clahan even, and we'll go into Clahan's group now. They just finished ahead of Staker Wallace on points differential that they played out a draw around in the group. So it just goes to show that if a team can get their house in order, they can do great things. And this group, Ballybrown knew going into the final round that a win over Staker Wallace would get them through. They got that job done. Castletown, Ballygran and Killeedy came on into the game level on points. They finished the season level on points on 7. But Killeedy go through by virtue of a greater scoring difference. And that's how close it comes down to, Matt. And then Rathkeil were only a point behind them on 6 points. So another extremely tight group.
Another extremely tight group, Jack. And just a little side to that particular group. I was of the opinion that when you had group stages, that all the final round games in the group stage where promotion and relegation or progression to a knockout stage was at issue, that all the games had to be played at the same time on the same day. Yeah. Now, Ballybrown and the Staker Wallace played on Thursday night, which meant that Ballybrown had sealed a place in I'm not criticizing Ballybrown or anything like that for it, but I'm just wondering what went wrong with the system or why was the system changed? Ballybrown knew going into the game, going into Saturday's games that they had already qualified, and it made the Castletown Ballygran Killeedy game an absolute knockout game, because as you see they finished level on points after finishing level in Mick Neville Park on Saturday. And I'm hearing that it was in dramatic circumstances that Castletown Ballygran were 4 or 5 points up late in the game, and that Killeedy staged a dramatic late comeback and forced the draw, and therefore forced their way into the quarterfinals. Then just another little interesting aside to that as well, Jack, of course, is that among the Killeedy backroom team this year is Gavin O'Mahony of Kilmallock, who will be involved in the county senior final on Sunday week. And we've seen the contribution that he has made to Kilmallock getting to the final. So Gavin is dipping his toes in management and coaching. I think it's his first foray into it, and certainly it's going all right, very well, thank you at the moment, anyway.
Yeah, and the latter stage of his career in both coaching and playing.
But if you look back at that group in its totality, I think reflecting back on the results, probably the result of the entire group was Ballybrown's win over Castletown Ballygran.
Yeah.
I for one fancied Castletown Ballygran from the very, very outset. That they were quite capable of recapturing the type of form that they had in 2019, which took them all the way to the county final, only to lose to Kilmallock. And that was the year you will recall that the South and the West were joined for the Junior A Championship before the Junior A Championship went to all county, and they had previously met in the West final, and Castletown Ballygran had won it. And they subsequently progressed to the county final, and the expectation was that Castletown Ballygran would repeat that performance against Kilmallock, but they didn't. It was Kilmallock that got through and won the county, and the expectation was that this year now Castletown Ballygran were surprised in the quarter final last year by Patrick Swell. In a shock in Kilmallock, probably the shock of the round. But the expectation was that they had regrouped this year and that they would be a force to be reckoned with. But if there was a defining game in the entire group, Jack, it was probably Ballybrown's victory over Castletown Ballygran that had the fallout of Ballybrown going through to the quarterfinals and Castletown Ballygran going out of the championship.
Yeah, I like you, I had picked Castletown Ballygran to win the championship, but that's not to be. And we'll look at them quarterfinals more later on.
But just before we go from the Division 4 or Group 4, we had an intriguing situation there at the bottom in the penultimate round where Clahan and the Staker Wallace met in what was a crucial game. It was a sort of a winner-take-all game in that whoever won was assured of status, and whoever lost was assured of being semi-final, relegation semi-final, and that ended in a draw as well.
Yeah, no, it was, as you said, we wanted to give the Junior A some time today because it really was an exceptional competition, and it's just, as you said, it's a pity that you couldn't get to more of these games, but that's just the way it is. We'll talk about them later on, but just to clarify, Munger St. Paul's versus St. Pat's, Ballybrown versus Caroline, Ballybrickenborough versus Killeedy, and Dune versus Saint Cairns. We'll come back to them in a while, Matt. We've Camogie to look forward to as well, the final round in the senior and intermediate championships. There's 2 more rounds in the other championships, but at the top tier, you've Bruff versus Newcastle West, Ahan versus Crocora, and Granagh Ballingarry versus the Pierce. Now, the first teams in that are playing at home this weekend. Then in the intermediate championship, Killeedy versus Ballygran, Cappamore versus Templedanton, Croke Kilfinney versus Monleen, and Maru Boher versus Newcastle West. And into the Junior A Championship then, Patchwell versus Ballybrown and Gabley versus Munger St. Paul's. And then Granagh Ballingarry versus Ballybrown, Dune versus the Piershig, and Monleen versus Kilmallock, and St. Ailbe's versus Bruff. We'll just focus on the senior championship first, Matt. That Bruff versus Newcastle West game. Newcastle West are obviously through. Now, Group 1 is a far more complex than Group 2, but Newcastle West are guaranteed their place. They play Bruff, Ahan play Crocora. If Ahan beat Crocora, they're guaranteed to go through. But if Crocora and Bruff both win, it'll come down to points with the 2 of them finishing on 3 points after their round 1 win. I suppose, firstly, on Newcastle, Matt, they have been the standout team of the championship, and you probably would expect them to make it 3 from 3 and really nail down their marker as one of the teams, probably the team to beat, even though they aren't champions.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, Jack. I know we'll be talking about Killeedy in a minute, but obviously they were beaten in the final last year, and for various reasons, which we've already outlined in this medium, that they would appear to be much stronger this year and appear to be at full strength. They have been impressive. and I think they really put down a marker in the opening round with the manner and the size of their victory over a Han. I think it raised a lot of eyebrows, and then you had they came in the second round and they had a good win over Crocora. But full credit to a Han, Jack. They bounced back and they had a good win over Bruff. They now have home advantage. In so far as home advantage counts at this level, when they take on Crocora. Like Crocora were intermediate champions, I think, in 2019. So that will be an interesting game. If you ask me to nail my colours to the mast, I would say that a Han will come through that, and that it will be Newcastle West and a Han that will feature in the semi-finals. Now Newcastle West travel to Bruff. It's a huge game for Bruff. It's an opportunity for Bruff were they to pull off a victory that they may, if the other result went in their favour, as you outlined at the start, could see them through to a semi-final in their first year. But
a year they didn't think they'd get.
But you must also remember, Jack, what will be very, very important here is were Bruff or Crocora both to lose, the margin of defeat could be very, very important in that there's a senior B final which will be going to the third place side. So were Newcastle West and a Han to win, they could determine who will get through to the B final depending on the margin of the results.
Yeah, of course, because they played out a draw in the first round. Then in Group 2, far more straightforward. Killeedy beat Granabellingary and Apirshig. Now, they only beat them by 4 points combined, so it wasn't easy by any means of the imagination. But Granabellingary and Apirshig play this weekend. The winner goes through to play Newcastle West. They know that the loser goes in to that Senior B final. But you have to aim for the top tier, even though it's a daunting task facing Newcastle West. You have to put yourself in these positions. Granabellingary lost Killeedy by a point. Apirshig lost by 3 points. But Granabellingary haven't played in 4 weeks by the time they get to the field on Sunday, which we've seen in the Senior Hurling Championship. A lot of times the team that have played more recently have hit the ground running. So it's a hard one to call, Matt.
It's a hard one to call. It's a straight knockout game. The winner goes into the A semi-final or the Cup semi-final, and the loser goes into the B or the Shield final. Now you would have to say, and all the indications are that Killeedy, even though they're through, they haven't hit the level yet, and I say yet. That saw them, that propelled them to be county champions last year. But I suppose it's a very, very good sign of a team, Jack, if you haven't hit top form and you come through the group unscathed, with 4 points from 4, 100% record, that's job done. So their focus now will be on a semi-final. And it would look at this remove. It is definite, actually, that they will avoid Newcastle West in the semi-final, because Newcastle West have topped the other group. So their likely opponents in the semi-final will be either a Han, Crocora, or Bruff. I think that is fair to say, with the likelihood at this point being a Han. Now, it's a huge game for both sides, and if you were to go on the respective results against Killeedy, Granabellingary losing by a point, Apirshig losing by 3 points, there's no doubt Apirshig are a coming force in Limerick Camogie. They've been there and they've been improving, and there's players coming through at the county level at different levels. We saw the contribution, particularly from place balls, that Ian Harrington contributed to the Limerick junior team this year. So whilst one as recently as 2 years ago, you would be inclined to dismiss the threat of na Piarsaigh to Granaballangary in this one, but not anymore, because there has been a bit of a coming together. There has been a vast improvement in the Piarsaigh and Granaballangary. I suppose it's fair to say aren't forced that they used to be, but they still have a great tradition, and they love the championship, and they were rank outsiders against Killeedy in the opening round. And we saw how close they came. This one will probably go down to the wire, but with Granaballangary having na Piarsaigh in Ballingarry and a home support which they're well able to muster, you'd have to lean towards Granaballangary making it through, Jack.
Yeah, you'd lean towards the final four being Newcastle, Killeedy to be joined by Han and Granaballangary, but na Piarsaigh, Cricora and Bruff will all have their say. Moving on to the Intermediate Championship, it's far more complex then, and I'll get up the graph so far from this year. Maru Boher win 2 from 2, and from what I can tell, they're guaranteed of their place in the final because Killeedy are playing Ballygran, who Killeedy picked up a first round win over Newcastle West, and Ballygran also beat Newcastle West. So from my calculations, Killeedy versus Ballygran, the winner there will join Maru Boher in the knockout stages. Maru Boher will top the group. Then at the other side, I have Cappamore have won both their games, but they can still be caught because they play Monaleen, they play Templelanton. Templelanton won their first game against Crokilfinney, and Monaleen have also won a game when they beat Templelanton. So wins for Monaleen and Templelanton will see themselves join Cappamore on top, every team having 6 points. But also, if Templelanton lose and Crokilfinney win, then there'll be 3 teams on 2 points, and Cappamore will go through on 6. So there's a lot to play. There's obviously that huge game between Killeedy and Ballygran in Group 1, and you can start with that, Matt. But in Group 2, there's so many permutations, and I'll leave it up there for you for the benefit, because I know myself I have to be looking at it to remember everything that's going on.
Jack, I'm in awe of your mathematics and your permutations. They're spot on.
About time. It's only taken 158 episodes.
Is that all? Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right there in Group 1. Maru Boher, by my calculations, all they are through and through to the semi-final and topping the group. And the second place rests will be between Killeedy and Ballygran. Now, you rightly said Killeedy beat Newcastle West in the first round, and subsequently lost to Maru Boher very, very closely now, mind you. In round 2, there was only 2 points in it, 1-6 to 1-4, whilst Maru Boher were far more convincing winners over Ballygran. But you'd have to think it's not too long ago, it's not many moons ago that I can't remember the year that Ballygran were county senior champions, and just on that note, a man that we spoke about yesterday was the coach in that particular year that guided them to the county title, Saoirse Bulfin. Yeah. It all comes down to Killeedy and Ballygran. You would have to say from the early results, Jack, that the possibility of Newcastle West upsetting Maru Boher is most unlikely.
Definitely.
Most unlikely. So there might be a permutation if Maru Boher were... No, look, Maru Boher are through anyway, but they just might be pulled back into second place if there was an extraordinary series of results. But it looks to me as if they're through on top of the group.
Yeah, I think they're true. I think they're top regardless, because if someone joins
they'll have
one head-to-head.
Yeah, they would have the head-to-head. You're absolutely right. I knew your mathematics, Jack, were exemplary. Right, if we move across to to Group 2, it's a little bit more trickier there. And Capamore, you'd have to say, who were last year's runners-up, have 1 foot in the semi-finals. And I suppose you'd have to say as well, nearly, that Croke Kilfinny have a battle in their hands to stay in the competition. The crucial game there, of course, they're both crucial games in that you have Temple Lanton and Mona Lean both on 2 points. Yeah. Temple Lanton travelled to Capamore and Mona Lean travelled to Croke Kilfinny. Now, were Croke Kilfinny to win that, they certainly could come back into the mix on scoring difference. Isn't that right, Jack?
It is, yeah. And just to clarify there, that Temple Lanton Mona Lean game in round 2, their scores are reversed. Mona Lean won that game 3-16 to 112, in case anyone is getting confused there. But yeah, Croke Kilfinny will, because they only lost by 3 points to Capamore and only lost by 2 points to Temple Lanton in the first round. So scoring difference shouldn't be that big of a problem for them if they can get a win under their belts.
Yeah, if they can get a win under their belts, it certainly could change everything. And of course, the magnitude of the win as well could very well change everything. So it promises to be a fascinating finale, fascinating final group games in Group 2. Literally, all 4 teams are in the race for the semi-finals. And apart from Capamore, I suppose they're all in the race to finish bottom. The three others are in the race to finish bottom.
It's a crazy group altogether. That's one thing that we know from that group. Capamore can't go down. That is the only guarantee in that group.
That is the only certainty.
And I was wrong earlier, Matt, when I said about the Junior A Championship. The Junior A Championship actually concludes this weekend, the group stages. Mungret St. Paul's are playing Galbally. They both beat Blackrock Effin, so they're through. The 2 of them is just to see who finishes top. And Ballybrown and near neighbours Patrickswell play. They both lost a dare in the first round, so they're through. So Ballybrown versus Patrickswell in the Junior A Championship will be a cracking one, because the winner of that goes through. In the Junior B Championship, then there's 3 rounds remaining, and the Junior A or the Junior 12-a-side county final is on between Crocora and Killeedy this Saturday. So, and another huge weekend, the Camogie to go through. I suppose just on that Ballybrown versus Patrickswell, there'd be no love lost there in that game, with the winner earning a place in the semi-finals.
Parish Derby. We were talking about Parish Derby yesterday, Bruff and
Camogie.
And Camogie, and we got a very interesting comment in on our screen there, if you remember, from Adrian Kelly. Certainly there'll be no love lost, and actually the parish will be polarized anyway for a couple of hours on Sunday. But and the fact that it is a winner take all. But Jack, they met in the county senior hurling final, so if they got over that hump, they'll probably get over this one.
Yeah, but it'll just be interesting. And again, it's great to see that in these group stages there's so much to play for in all the groups, in the Camogie, not only in the Camogie but also in hurling and football. It's been a brilliant round robin, because we can kind of say that the group stages and nearly everything are done at this stage. We ran through the Junior B, and I'll actually just run through it there again for you. So in the Junior, just digressing from the Camogie now, just into the general state of play across and this is all thanks to you, Matt, as well, because you have these. We'll start with the West overall in the football this weekend. Ballysteen versus Knockaderry and Granite Ballingarry versus Tay. The hurling final in the West is between Adair and Newcastle West. Moving on to the East, Knockane are playing Fedamore in the West football final. Capamore beat Ballybrick and Bohermore in the West, or in the East hurling. The 2 of them go through. So the finalists go through into the county round, we'll say. In the South, Galbally beat Croom in the South football final. And then it's into the semi-finals. You obviously have Bruff versus Camogie Rovers, the one we're talking about there, and Blackrock versus Brewery. And then in the city, Mungret St. Paul's beat Clahan in the city football. And there's one semi-final in the hurling, the Piershig versus Patrickswell.
And the Piershig beat Patrickswell last night, 3-17 to 2-13.
So the final will be in the Piershig versus Kildare Pallaskinnery. So
yeah.
we have 6 of the 8 in the football, and we have 6 of the 8 in the hurling who's going to contest the county stages, junior B, and once they get into that stages, we'll do more in depth on them, Matt. But fair the predictions.
At this weekend, an awful lot will be tidied up, and that the remaining semi-finals in the in the West and in the South, the West football and the South hurling will be played. So we will know the last 8. What we will not be quite clear on, maybe for another week after, is the actual pairings, because they will be crossed with the divisions, first in one division against second, and vice versa, something similar to the junior A hurling. And I'm not sure what way they're crossed this year, because it was all county last year, and there was no junior B county competitions last year. The junior B competition ceased at divisional level because of the COVID outbreak. So it'll be interesting to see whether it's South against East or West against City, or what way it will be. But that will eventually determine the quarter-final pairings.
Yeah, so we haven't forgot about the junior Bs. They're as important as the seniors. Just it's so hard to keep track of all these fixtures, and so many of them clashing. But I think that's pretty much everything for the weekend, Matt. Obviously, yesterday's podcast looked back.
No, Jack, we're missing. We have one more game which we didn't. We have the senior hurling promotion final between Adair and South Liberties.
Oh, we also have the relegation final as well in the senior football.
Yes.
So we'll start with the promotion, because it's probably better to look forward to. Promotion is Adair and South Liberties, and if the quarterfinals are anything to go to, Matt, like, it's a toss of a coin between these two teams who are both within their rights to be in the Senior A Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reflecting on it before we came on, not only did they run their quarterfinal opponents close, but those that conquered them are now contesting the county final, which is a further fillip, and I suppose it feeds into the narrative which we spoke briefly about yesterday, on the foot of a question that we received in while on air, that the gap has certainly closed, and now it's been going around for a while, and you hear it, and I heard it in the week, that you'd be better off to lose the promotion final, that it might give you an easy path to the quarter final next year. But for reasons which we said yesterday, Jack, that may not be the case, because the loser of this game is going to be in section B, as will Ballybrown, as will Kildimo Pallaskenry, as will Garrisballan. So, Blackrock will be there as well. So if you were to have revert back to the old formula of 6, 2 out of those at best can only go to the quarterfinals. Yeah. And a quarterfinal isn't guaranteed, And
also to be in the relegation final then as well, if of the 6, 2 are into relegation final as well.
Well, it's not going to be a kind of a free pass or a free ticket to the quarterfinals anymore, because certainly we spoke about Kildimo Pallaskenry, and they're here to stay. Ballybrown and either Mungret or Capamore are going to be joining it. So I think this is going to be a very interesting game. All the forum would suggest that that we're going to have a cracker. They are probably, were slightly the more impressive during the campaign to date, in that their only defeat was that dramatic defeat to Jason Gillan and Patrick Swell in the quarterfinal. South Liberties, big winners over Black Rock. Bit of a surprise when they slipped up to Garrisballan, but slip up they did. Faced Kilmallock in the quarterfinal, scored 5-17 and lost the hurling match. were they to repeat the goal scoring trick that they pulled off against Kilmallock, you would certainly fancy them. But I think there will be alert to that. Certainly do not give away goals, or certainly don't give them away very easily anyway. So I'm leaning towards it there on that one, Jack. But at this moment, it's very, very, very close to call.
Yeah, I'll get a proper prediction for you when we're doing all the games in a while. You might have changed your mind in the next few minutes. And obviously, then in the relegation of the senior football, you have Napier versus Galbally. I suppose Napier probably have been flirting with relegation for a few years now, but have always managed to escape. Whereas Galbally were in the semi-final of the competition outright last year, and now find themselves one game away from the intermediate ranks, which they came out of only 3 years ago. Like, it's a perilous position to be in for both sides. And again, it's very hard to call, because the form guide would suggest Galbally will have enough to stay safe, but Napier have shown that instinct to survive, which Ahan have shown as well in the senior hurling championship. The last 2 years, we both brought them off, and they came through. Like, I don't know how. We're not going to predict this one as in pick a team to win, but it's too tight to call really at the end of the.
Yeah, Jackie, this is the type of game we least like talking about. Because at the end of the day, there's somebody going to be bitterly disappointed. And it represents a fall from grace for Galbally, who contested the semi-final against Adair last year. So it's disappointing. I've seen Adair, I've seen Galbally in action. I haven't seen the Piersic, but I'll come to them in a minute. But I saw him against Newcastle West, and as I've already said, that they were possibly unlucky that they didn't get a win that night, which could have changed everything. But they have been in free fall since, Jack. They suffered a very, very heavy defeat at the hands of Father Casey's in the second round, which plunged them into the relegation playoff. And for long periods in the relegation playoff against Ballylanders, they failed to raise a gallop. And the stakes were so high, bragging rights were so important. They're only 3 miles apart at the respective villages of Galbally and Ballylanders. So you can imagine the heightened tension in the area, in the best possible sense, in the lead up to the game. But at no stage did they look like sending Ballylanders into the relegation playoff final. So I would have serious fears for Galbally on those counts. Now, Napier, they lost to Adair in the first round. Again, they were distinctly unlucky to lose to Ula in the second round, and could very, very well have been in the quarterfinals of the championship. So, and then they came into the group stages, and where they faced Saint Cairns, and you'd have fancied Saint Cairns all day, and that's how it transpired. But only after Napier had lost Gordon Brown to injury, who was having an absolute blinder. Plus, St. Cairns needed 2 periods of extra time before they saw off Napier. If you put me on the spot on this one, Jack, I think the Napier forum would suggest that they'll survive, plus the fact that they have had a couple of brushes with relegation in recent years and done the business. And I was just left wondering, leaving the Gaelic grounds last Sunday in the aftermath of Napier going out of the Senior Hurling Championship, that there are a number of very, very good footballers on that Napier Senior Hurling team. And I'm just wondering, in their hour of need, will they be summoned? So, like you're talking about, of course, Will O'Donoghue is one of the best footballers in this county. Yeah. But you're talking about Ronan Lynch, Thomas Grimes, David Dempsey, all top-class footballers. So it'll be interesting to see whether they will be summoned or not, or whether they will take up an offer to help out in the hour of need. So, but that's only a subplot or an aside. But I have a feeling that Na Piarsaigh would possibly get over the line in this one, Jack.
Yeah, I just had that sneaking suspicion for Na Piarsaigh, and I actually completely forgot about like so Will and them. Now, whether they'll play or not, probably not, because you probably rely on the group of players so far this year, because like they were well beaten by Dare, as you mentioned the first game, but they pushed Ula all the way, pushed Cairns all the way. Like, they can count it as unlucky.
Were Gordon Brown not to play, and he's such a central figure for him, it could change everything,
Yeah, look, an injury or anything in this game, a red card there, and this could change the whole game. Like, it's just these games, relegation games, like finals, take on a life of their own, and
absolutely,
they're very hard to call. But I suppose moving on, Matt.
And I have a habit of calling him wrong, Jack.
Well, you're far better at calling them than me. If I'll just get up the table. This was the weekend we picked. I think we predicted 9 games in total, Matt. Was it, or was there? There was 2 football, 4 hurling. No, sorry, there was 8 games. You got 4, I got 3. That because it goes to show how the predictions have gone. We both said Dune. I said Pat as well, in fairness. Both said Newcastle and Adair, and then you had the 2 intermediate semi-finalists, Crokilfinney and Effin. I got them spectacularly wrong. 7 points ahead. You're clear. I'm going to give myself as much chance as I can this week, Matt. We're going to do most of the games that are on this weekend to see can I snatch some sort of respect from this thing. We'll start with intermediate football, Matt. St. Cairns versus Kildare Palace Kenry. I'll let you call this one first.
Sinnons by 3.
Sinnons by 3. I have a slight feeling for KP, and I'm going to say KP by 2. Now, I think the not having Sean McSweeney is a huge loss for St. Sinnons, because he was probably Limerick's best player in the championship last year in the couple of games he played, and I just think KP can capitalise on the momentum in the club. Rakiel versus Gerald Griffins.
I'm going for Griffins by 2.
I'm going to go for Rakiel by 1. When I first heard the pairings, I was thinking, yeah, Griffins will get over the line, but I don't know. I think Rakiel own one after that quarter-final you mentioned a few years back when they clawed back a heavy deficit.
I factored that into my thought process, Jack.
Yeah, so we've different our final pairings anyway. I'm going for KP and Rakiel. You're saying Sinnons and George Griffins. The bookies' favourites. Now, you've been proven right far more than me in the past. Moving on to the Premier Junior Football semi-finals. Newcastle West versus Mount Collins, Matt.
I'm going for Newcastle West.
By
3.
Newcastle by 3. I'm going to go for Mount Collins by 1. The fact that Newcastle still have the senior championship to deal with, I just don't know if they could still use players. They could still have players in mind that they don't want playing, but we'll see. And Casey's versus Croom. I think we'll agree on this one.
I'm going for Croom.
By
2. I have been with Croom from the start. Right at the very outset, I said Croom, and I'm sticking with him.
I'd say Croom by 4. I was with it, and Mount Collins prepared to that. Now, probably put my foot in the Mount Collins camp, but yeah, I think Croom as well. I'm going to say by 4. The Junior A hurling, Matt. To give us 2, we'll start with Mungret St. Paul's versus St. Pat's.
This is a cracker. This is, as I say, we're poking in the dark here on this one, Jack, because we haven't seen the teams, but from what we've heard and from what we've read, I'm inclined to favour St. Pat's. By maybe 3 points.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Pats by 2. If the Munger team that played against the Skeeton was there, I'd be definitely leaning towards Munger. They've lost a couple of players I mentioned before, and if Munger are losing players from that junior team, it's their best players they're going losing. That's just the way it goes with second teams. So I'm just going
It is absolutely that is it, and they're in that situation now. So
yeah, I've seen Munger play, and they play a lovely brand of hurling, but they've lost a couple of key players so far this year. So just slightly leaning towards Pats. They have a hurler of the year in their ranks, and that's invaluable at a junior A grade. The other Saturday game, Ballybricken Bohermore versus Killeedy.
This is a huge one. I'm leaning towards Killeedy.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I'm going to say Khalidi by 3.
Yeah, I'd say Khalidi by 4.
Khalidi by 4. That would free up Ballybricken and the football the following week. So they're still on both fronts yet, Ballybricken more, but obviously could upset us.
And they're still in they're still in the Junior B hurling. They're in the county quarter final because they go through despite the defeat to Cappamore in the East final.
Yeah. On Sunday then, Dune versus Saint Cairns.
This is one that I'm finding it very, very hard to call because St. Cairns are something of a surprise package. Dune, as you said, maybe have lost 1 or 2. I'm going to go for Cairns on it by 3 points.
Yeah, I kind of are slightly leaning towards Cairns, but I think I might just go for, what did you say, Cairns by 2, is it?
By 3?
By 3. I'm going to go with Dune just to go against you, but I wouldn't be surprised. Cairns are building. They've won, I think, 3 or 4 in a row at this stage, so we'll see. Caherline versus Ballybrown. We spoke in depth about Ballybrown the last 2 podcasts, and I'd say we'll both go for Ballybrown again, will we?
Yeah, I'm going by Ballybrown by 1 reluctantly, I think,
Yeah.
That's a cautious one now.
Yeah, I'm not ruling out Caroline by any stretch of imagination, but
I'm not. And Demin Gillan, who's vastly experienced, is in charge. Aaron and Jason's dad is in charge out there at Caroline, our coach out there, and I wouldn't discount. I'm very, very slow to discount Caroline, but Ballybrown have come through the group stages, and that there has been no draw off their squad. And I was looking at their squad, and there's a good few fellas there with a bit of serious senior experience, which could count for something, and which probably might tilt it in their favour.
Yeah, and they've obviously them 3 in a row minor and under 19 teams that won 3 counties.
Absolutely, and you'll have fellas coming into that team putting their hand up, and you've the like of Kevin Foster, Mark Sheehan, James Hall, Ross Griffin, vastly experienced players that will help to nurture those through and make a formidable force. And certainly their group stage performances have been very impressive. But Jack, it comes down to almost the difference between a league and a championship. This is the cut and thrust of knockout hurling. Caroline will not die easy, but I just have the slightest of slight favour for a 1-point win for Ballybrown.
Yeah, we'll probably be talking about a Caroline win next week.
That's the most cautious vote I've given today.
And then obviously Adair versus South Liberties in the Section B promotion final. You said
I'm going with Adair by 4. Adair by 4.
Adair by 4. I'm going to go with Adair as well, but I'm going to be more cautious. I'm going to go Adair by 2. But for a game like that, like what you're hoping for is something similar to the quarterfinals, really, just a good game.
Well, what we're hoping for is that both sides will. You're right, Jack. Absolutely right. That they'll show the type of form that they showed in the quarterfinals. But what you've got to factor into these things, this particular time, it's a sort of a surreal game in many ways. It's of a consolation nature in other ways, and what you've got to factor in is the fallout from the defeat in the quarterfinals, and sometimes it's not the defeat but the manner of the defeat. But now both of those teams went out in similar circumstances in that they had victory within their grasp, only for it to be snatched away from Adair by Jason Gillan and for South Liberties by extra time. So, they're both in that same boat, but you would be hoping, because certainly they didn't look one bit out of place, either of those two teams, when they were up against the now county finalists in the quarter-final.
No, not at all. Two exceptional sides, and you'll be hopeful whoever goes up that they'll be able to handle themselves in senior next year, and that whoever stays in Senior B will be able to build on that, and they'll know themselves they can get through the quarterfinals and they'll have that extra game. So we're just looking for a good game. Both favouring it there, but as easy it could be South Liberties. If one team shows up like they did in the quarterfinal and the other team doesn't, then that team will win. That's
what it may come down to, and the respective managements and how they refocus their charges after losing the quarterfinal, and above all the circumstances of the loss of the quarterfinal, because we could have been talking about Na Piarsaigh and Adair and Dune and South Liberties last weekend as easy as we were talking about Dune and Kilmallock and Na Piarsaigh and Patrickswell. It was that close.
Yeah, and this game should be
how they're going to react to it. That is going to be very, very, very important. And I think they have a fair sense now, even though you can't only just go on one game alone. But you saw how close Ballybrown were to Kilmallock. You saw how Ahan led Dune for so long. That last ceiling of the four big teams is about to be broken through, and like there are teams there waiting to gate crash into the Limerick Senior Hurling semi-finals.
Yeah, and hopefully next year will be the year. But it's been a very exciting championship thus far, and it's been exciting throughout all grades, across all codes in men's and women's sport. So it's been a brilliant year and a brilliant return to having fans at games, Matt. But we'll leave it there. We've 81 minutes on the clock at this stage. For anyone that wants to look back on last week's games, yesterday's pod, episode 158, part 1, we'll look back on last weekend's games, the senior hurling, senior football, intermediate hurling semi-finals, and today we focused solely on what's coming up this weekend. We had semi-finals in the football championships, quarterfinals in Junior A, and the final round of some of the Camogie championships. So another brilliant episode, Matt. Thanks.
Jack, this particular podcast is like the quarterfinal. We had extra time.
Yeah. Well, we've had that extra time last week, so so many games. We're coming to the conclusion of all the championships, but there's no championship in any code, I think, that has any one hugely standout team that you can't see past them. Even some of the grades that have finals played and finals to be played, you still don't know which way it's going to go. So it's brilliant, and it keeps us excited anyway for another 2 weeks before we get into, and we were talking about yesterday, we'll have the start of the Premier Under 21 Hurling Championship next week. I think the football might be the week after, the A is the week after. There's football coming along, so there's a load to come yet from this podcast.
As they say, Jack, you ain't seen anything yet.
Yeah, and sure, I don't want to say it, but just around the corner we'll have the return of the victorious Limerick team as well. So there's so much to stay tuned for over the next coming weeks. And
we've the Harty Cup starting next month. We've the Fitzgibbon Cups coming down the track, and the Sigerson Cup. So a lot of talking to be done, Jack, as well as a lot of hurling and football.
And no better than the two of us to keep talking. But I'll leave you with that, Matt. Huge thanks for that, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome, Jack.
The impression again we get out with what you put into is like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the war court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there